Good morning. It is, let's get Sue in here. It is Tuesday, June 15th, our last session before we have a little summer break. We're reading The Bris by Eileen Pollack. And I'll give, the first go around. Did you like it? Yeah, it wasn't, yeah, all right. Well, again, I have 58 minutes and I'll put it in the chat and I will email you. I found a 15-minute movie of the story.
Oh,
And it's, I might show a little bit at the beginning and I was like, oh, because I guess you could have made it longer, but it's set in England, not America. And it's really, really fascinating. Really, really fascinating. As always, I like to begin with looking at the author. It just gives us, a little window into the story, I think. Here she is. And she's, I'll read a little bit about her in a hot minute here. And let's see, stop share, then I'll go back to, let me read just a quick bit about Eileen. She grew up in Liberty, New York, the heart of the Jewish Catskills. That's interesting, where her grandparents owned and operated a small hotel. What else is there to do there? Her father was the town dentist and her mother taught third grade. One of the first two women to graduate from Yale with a BS in physics. Eileen later earned an MFA from the University of Iowa, where she was awarded a teaching writing fellowship. There's a big writing fellowship there at Iowa, and we've read many of our authors. So it's well noted. She's the author of the novels, The Professor of Immorality, that came out in 2019, The Bible of Dirty Jokes, 2018. I haven't seen that one. A Perfect Life, and Paradise, New York. Eileen's novel, Breaking an Entry, published in 2012, was awarded the 2012 Grub Street National Book Prize, whatever that is. Wait, here we go. And she's received fellowships from the NEA, a longtime faculty member and former director of the Helen Zell MFA program in creative writing at the University of Michigan. She now lives and writes in Boston. So that's a little bit about her. And talking about this whole anthology, the anthology introduction explains how the new Jewish writers are portraying Jewish identity differently than we saw in the post-World War II fiction of Malmud, Bellow, Paley, Ozick, and Roth. And we had a lot of those authors in that book we did last year. Those writers lived at both edges of their hyphens, American Jewish, and defined themselves or found themselves defined through their incongruities. Contemporary literature by American Jews easily dispenses with these hyperbolic declarations. Identity remains an issue, but it often metamorphoses into something else. Ironized, detached from the traditional anxieties about acceptance and exposure. The most candid instance of identity fiction is Eileen Pollack's story, The Bris. The story is a classic identity as quandary fable, upended, the Gentile in search of acceptance and self-validation, now desiring to be a Jew. So here's a question, and then we'll see how we answer it. The Bris, entertaining as it is, also raises serious questions about what it is to be Jewish and about the necessary give and take without accounting in relationships. The secret, duplicitous life, a beloved theme in literature, draws Pollack repeatedly. How could such an honest man live such a whooping lie? What's your answer to that question? Eileen. Elaine.
Lie.
There you go. There you go.
Believed that he was a Jew, and because he was in the Catskills, and you are who you are, surrounded by other people, And I think it was just a sweet story, and he tried to please his family and his wife. And she, as she kept saying in the book, he was a good man, he was a good father. He just was afraid of a bris. And that seemed to be his only departure from being a Jew. And actually, what is a Jew? I mean, it raises all sorts of questions. We as Reformed Jews, I do not do a lot of the rituals, and I don't keep kosher. I could give you a whole list of things that I don't do, but I am a Jew. So what does that say?
You know, for me, Bris is the last stand. And you know, my daughter's about to have a baby. We don't know if it's a boy or a girl. And I know that some of her friends have these, her Jewish friends have these long debates about Brit Milah. And I said, you know, please tell me if you have a boy, it's going to have a bris. And which I think that's going to happen. But it's fascinating that it's not taken for granted now with this young generation, the bris. And so for me that, you know, it's like Tevye, you know, okay, you can go meet him and blah, blah, blah. You can do this, you can do that. But, you know, bris, that's just, you know, it's a commandment, it's a mitzvah that, and, you know, of course, we're all women here, and, you know, I'm a woman, but still, it's very important to me in the ceremony. Okay,
But this
Lynn.
was the bris of a grown man, and that makes a whole difference.
Totally.
The operation of it and the circumstances of it made a big difference.
Yeah.
And you just keep, I know you keep putting things off, and a year becomes 10 and 10 becomes 20, and it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I agree. Lynn.
A couple of things. The song from Chorus Line kept echoing in my head on what I do for love.
Oh, interesting.
And so I said to Gary, go over the words. He said, well, she was saying, you know, how far can I go for dance? I said, well, can we expand this and say, is it what you do for anything that you're going above and beyond for the person you love, you know, and the sacrifice that you love? And I felt that the story was also about love and what we do for love. I also felt that the whole story was Judaism in the sense that everybody was making different ethical and moral decisions. And I feel that Judaism is all about that. It starts from the first line, whether or not his father will accept a liver from his son. And he said, why waste a miracle on an elderly man like that? And it goes on and on with, you know, whether the rabbis are going to honor his wishes, whether he's going to tell his fiancée that he will have, whether he should say that I'm going to have children with you or not. I mean, there are all kinds of ethical and moral decisions in the story. That part I really liked. I thought the story was really long. I think it suffered from lack of editing. That was my only complaint. But otherwise, I thought it captured Judaism, and the bris was just symbolic of, you know, we went through this with my daughter, and they decided they were going to do it. The doctor did it in the hospital. She didn't want a bris. I mean, he was circumcised, but we didn't go through the formality of it.
She didn't want a moil.
He didn't want a moil, and Gary and I went into the room where the doctor was. The doctor had on his cell phone the prayers. He was a Jewish doctor. He said the prayers, and that was good enough for my daughter. So I think each person has to make their own ethical and moral decisions about life, and that's what the story's about.
Agreed. Alice and then Judy and then Susan.
Say, talking about the Bris, I have a lot of, I don't know, not conflict, but I have a son. He was circumcised, but we did not have a bris. And I have to tell you, it's very interesting because my husband, I like none of, and maybe this was good. Neither of our parents like said anything to us. I mean, we didn't know we were having a boy until he was born, but nobody said to us, well, you're going to do a bris, nobody said. And I have to say, I had never been to a bris. And I don't know, we didn't do one. It wasn't like, oh, we're not going to do it. It was just like, it just didn't happen. And I have issues with, I don't know, it's difficult when I hear somebody saying, well, that's like the essential thing, but is it? I have to say, our son who did not have a bris is very, very, very into the Jewish community and has been, and I don't know.
We can talk about that. We can definitely talk about that. Judy. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. All right, go ahead. I unmuted you.
Okay, I really like the story a lot because I think it forced you to decide what makes a Jewish man.
Mhm.
And my grandsons, albeit a couple of months after they were born, because of the circumstances of their birth, were circumcised, had a moil, the whole 9 yards. I have been at a bris that failed. The mother wanted her father, who was a surgeon, to do the bris, and a tragedy occurred, and the child had to go to the hospital.
Wait, the child what?
He had to go to the hospital. They had to take. I want you to know, if you were in the audience of that service, it made you think twice. I mean, granted, he wasn't a moil.
Yeah.
But he was a surgeon. Anyway, I think and I said to my husband, what do you think makes a Jewish man a Jewish man? And I think we decided that it was the morality, the kindness, the things that are not physical. You don't have to have certain muscles. You don't have to be able to walk. So while I love tradition, and certainly this man loved his father enough to want to give him that, and I admired that and the efforts he went through and the trauma he suffered to come to the conclusion he did. I really liked the story, and I really liked having to think about what makes someone Jewish.
Agreed. Thank you. Susan Wellick, and Judy Biederman, I'll get you.
I've had my hand up.
Yeah, Sandy, I have you. There's a list there. I got you. And Susan,
Okay.
yeah, look in the chat.
So I really like this story also, but I do agree with Lynn about the editing. I think that she put in a lot of unnecessary stuff that we didn't need to read about. But for the most part, I thought the father was actually a better Jew than the son. As far as the Judaism and the bris thing, I thought that there were so many hypocrites in this story.
Yes.
I think it showed a sad side of Judaism, and
Agreed.
people who allowed themselves to be bribed, and then they didn't live up to what they bribed about, and it really it made me a little bit sad to think that this is how rabbis and doctors would behave. and to try to fool people into getting their own way. It just, and as far as a Bris goes, it's interesting how when our son was born, my husband was in the service and we were stationed in England. And there was like one Jewish circuit rider who made a round of all the Air Force bases in Great Britain. Well, his time wasn't at the base where my son was born. And but I did have, it so happened, I had a British obstetrician deliver him on an American Air Force base, and he was Jewish. And my son was circumcised when he was 3 days old because I didn't have any other choice. And then I had this little book that was given to us by the Air Force for Jewish people. And it was amazing how you could, what it boiled down to was the most important thing was that the child was circumcised. If you can do this, fine. If you can't, okay. If you can do this, fine. If you can't, okay. And it goes on and on and on until finally the most important thing is that he's circumcised.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't until we came back to the United States and were members of a congregation, and my son was 2.5 years old, that we had a naming ceremony for him in the synagogue.
That's all. Yeah,
But we did what we could.
exactly. Evie.
Yeah, first of all, I was a little confused in the book because I thought that the whole issue was being buried in the cemetery. So I felt that the cemetery had too much importance. Obviously, it wasn't, not obviously, but to me, it wasn't important to his wife, who he was married to for a long time, that it was just the bureaucracy of the cemetery itself. Now,
Well, it's not exactly the bureaucracy of the cemetery. If he was going with Chevra Kadisha and they wash his body, then they're going to see, this is the
Yeah.
one thing that you can see on a man that makes him Jewish. And there's many movies and stories from the Holocaust. You cannot hide that you've been circumcised.
got it.
You can
Okay.
try, but you can't.
Okay. When our son was born, he was born on a Friday night. We had a moil and I was in the hospital for 10 days. So we didn't have the bris until Sunday as I was leaving. And this moil, he wouldn't, of course, I mean, it was in some kind of little community room there, just the immediate family. And then this man walked into the shower when I was taking a shower to tell me it's done, it's done, it's done. That really kind of turned me off. Meanwhile, we have two conversions. And I think the second conversion was they're a modern Orthodox family. The second conversion is the one that needed the prick or whatever it was.
A drop of blood.
But I mean, does the ritual depend on what kind of a conversion you have? Does a Reform conversion or a conservative conversion not demand that?
I think it's up to the person, but I will tell you this: the Jews coming from Russia were not circumcised, and Mount Sinai, which is a Jewish hospital, said they would circumcise all these adult Russians, and it's horribly painful, but they wanted to go through it, and they did hundreds of adult circumcision. I mean, wow, what a, it's something. I mean, it's really something. Izzy.
I don't know if anybody else in this group got angry when they read this. I was so angry at Rabbi Drabinsky, Dr. Schiffler, and the Moyle in the shabby part of Boca. How could his friend that he played tennis with, who knew he was observant, who knew he did all these wonderful things, not help Marcus in any way, shape, or form do something when this man had lived probably a more Jewish life than 99% of us had? Plus, he was his friend. and he knew his good deeds. The poor man was leaving his money to the synagogue. But that was besides the point. I just thought, I was so angry at the three of them. How could they
Yeah.
not have helped this man out?
Yeah, that wasn't pleasant. It wasn't like, oh, it's good to be Jewish. I mean, that was very disappointing. I mean, did you think that wasn't realistic?
I thought it wasn't realistic. I thought really part of Judaism is to be just, and you make moral decisions on the basis of who the person is and how they've lived their life. And as he said in there, there's no exceptions, because if you make exceptions for one, you can't make exceptions for anybody. This man is dying. He wants to be married next to his wife. There's exceptions, I think, that you could make that no one would know.
Right.
Personally, I think. And what his son decided to do in the end, I thought was brilliant. He's just going to dig them all up, take them all away, and start his own little plot of land. That was his solution, which was fine. But I just thought after all those years of friendship, no one would know he could do him that favor. And that made me very angry.
All right. So we have Sandy, then Judy Biederman, Sue Roberts, then Susan Wallach, then Alice. Sandy Kaminsky, go.
I pretty much agree with everything Susan Wallach said, also Izzy. And it actually embarrassed me to read some of it, to think some of these men who were supposed to be Orthodox or something, they really made very immoral decisions. I like the son and the father. I thought someone should have taken them someplace else and solved their problem, because the people they were dealing with were just horrible. And it embarrassed me. It embarrassed me to read the story. I thought if a Gentile friend of mine read that story, they would be embarrassed to even ask me questions about some of the stuff.
Oh, very interesting. I didn't think about that. That's very, very interesting. Judy Biederman.
Well, actually, there's a line in the story that addresses that, which is the one where he says, all these good things I did make people a good Christian. So there is a line that, they can't be crossed. So, Vanessa, you must know this experience too. You're doing all this programming, and the idea is to make it just Jewish enough. So you're not going to do a long prayer. You might do a short prayer. So these are the accommodations that we make to define who is a Jew. And these accommodations fit almost everybody until you get to the ones that can't be changed, that being the memorial. Even the cemetery can't be changed as time goes by. Time did not go by yet in Mocha, but where I grew up, there was one cemetery started by, Aunt Sadie and Uncle Jake from the old country, and it was very Orthodox. Well, time went by, and when my mother died quite a long time ago, and we were there with some good friends, and I see, my friend's father is buried in the cemetery. Well, guess what? He committed suicide. Yeah. So Aunt Sadie and Uncle Jake would never have permitted that, but they're long gone. And the nature of the definition of Jewish practice is really changed. And that's, I think, where the dying guy, Dad, the father, was caught up, because those old definitions couldn't be crossed when it came to circumcision.
Yeah, right. People ask me all the time, what about being tattooed? No, Reform, we don't use Chevra Kadisha. No Reform rabbi is going to go and say, where are your tattoos? And you're buried. There are also many more interfaith cemeteries because, there's one in Northbrook, because that is the reality.
Right.
Yeah, Sue Roberts.
Okay, so I was also going to say, perhaps part of the reason that the author wrote it this way with less than stellar models was to show some of the still inflexibility of Orthodox rule.
Yeah.
So you can say everything you want about how we should be accommodating, but Orthodox rule is Orthodox rule. And in this instance, there is no accommodation. The rule is the rule. It's not about what you think. It is the rule. And if you subscribe and follow all of those practices, you understand this. And it doesn't make any difference if the Moyle, the friend, the rabbi, if any of these people were his brother. The rule is the rule. They cannot make a comment. If they follow what they consider their rules for Jewishness through Orthodoxy, there is no compromise.
I think that's a fascinating point, and I wonder if an Orthodox person would have a different viewpoint reading this story. I have Susan Wellach, Alice, Lynn, and then Elaine. Susan Wellach.
Okay, one of the things that I found very interesting about the story, when the mother talked, the mother had said what a good father he was. Or somebody, I can't remember, but that the father had been such a good father. And yet Marcus, when he was a child, didn't have a really close relationship with his father. He had never seen his father naked. I mean, I had a father and two brothers, and I know they saw each other naked. They'd be in the bathroom at the same time. They would sometimes shower together. And my son and my husband took showers together when he was a little boy and things like that. I can't imagine a kid never having seen his father naked.
Except that father was keeping a secret.
The father was keeping a secret. And what was so interesting is how hard this Marcus tried to please his father at the end, to do anything his father wanted him to do for him. And yet it was just, and I wonder if the wife had ever seen a man naked before she got married.
Oh.
Because I mean, I had two brothers, so obviously I had seen a circumcised penis. I had never seen one that was uncircumcised.
Yeah.
And I mean, if my husband hadn't been, I mean, I would have been shocked. I mean, so I don't know. I found a lot of, questioning.
That's
the story.
Absolutely something we have to keep in mind. Alice.
Yeah, this goes to what a lot of people have said, but I've been thinking a lot about, Judy, what you said about what does it mean to be a Jewish man. And I think that both the father and Marcus were struggling with what does it mean to be a Jewish man. And then the contrast, and this goes to what Izzy and Sue Roberts said about the, strictures of, Orthodoxy. Well, is that what it means to be a Jewish man? Or is it the things that, I felt that there was a very loving relationship between the father and son, and the son only wanted to do things to help his father at the end of his life. And the father, from what I gathered, tried to be a good Jewish man his entire life, even though he wasn't born a Jew. And so I thought it was a good contrast between, the strictures of institutions and what people do, morally, ethically, and just trying to be good people.
Yeah, agreed. Lynn,
Okay, I want to respond to something that Sue Roberts said, and I don't know if she's aware of what she said, but at the beginning you said that Marcus was a better Jew than his father. Did you not say that?
Yeah.
Someone said that.
No,
I didn't hear that.
I didn't hear that.
I
either.
did.
Did anyone else hear that?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't hear it.
This is an interesting statement because when I married my husband, who was raised Orthodox, and I was a member of Lakeside. So I want you to remember Lakeside, Vanessa, in the 1950s.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was high classical reform.
Sunday morning services in Oregon, okay, very, very reform. And Gary was raised in Orthodox family, and he was not happy about being a Reformed Jew. And we went to 12 different temples in order to find a temple that would please both of us. So the question of, in his mind, he thought Orthodoxy, you were a better Jew than a Reformed Jew. Okay. And I said, how can you make these declarations like that? That's anti-Semitic to me. So in this story, what does it mean to be a Jewish man? I think as I'm listening to the discussion that Marcus this is his far better than any Hebrew school. This is his lesson in how to be a Jewish man. And helping his father and the sacrifices he makes and the conclusion that he comes up with at the end of the story with, I've got to put my own needs aside and think about my wife's needs, is a lesson in Judaism. It's the deeds that you do. It's not the rituals that you follow. And on page 97, I read through this.
Take my book.
Pardon me?
No, go ahead.
Oh, on page 97, when Marcus is talking to the rabbi, and he says, my father is dying. You say he is your friend, yet you can't find it in your heart to stretch the rules. Something came back to him from his years in Hebrew school. I thought any real rule could and should be broken to save a dying man. Rabbi Dobrinsky stopped to save a dying man, not hasten his death. This is truly were a matter of bringing about shalom bayit.
Shalom bayit.
Peace in the family, but it's only about allowing your father the convenience of being buried as a Jew. Now, the word convenience is interesting. The word choice here is so uncompassionate and cruel. But think of the peace it will bring my mother. Think of the peace it will bring me. I am not entirely without sympathy for your case, not your father's, but a conversion must come about as a complete change of heart. Well, who didn't have, the father had a complete change of heart. He converted in his heart.
Right.
And so how can the rabbi ignore his life of charitable deeds? How else do you prove that you're a Jewish man other than following and practicing the laws of Judaism? So to me, the story is about, it says the bris, but the question is the bris the whole thing? To the father, it is. And so to the son, it makes no sense. But because of his father's wishes, he went to extraordinary means to make this come about. And to me, I think Marcus at the end was really Jewish. Really Jewish. That's how I read the story.
Very interesting. We have Elaine, Judy, and then Judy Biederman.
Okay, my take is that this is not only a Jewish story, this is a human story.
I agree.
Forget the Jewishness of it. If you think about people, when your parent is dying, it changes you. It makes you more human. And the friends, they were moving on to someone else already. And we all know people like that. This is this group, which I love, and I think you are wonderful women, are very optimistic and very thoughtful. Not everyone is. And this man was dying, his friends were moving on to other people. And the rabbi has gone through lots of people who died. People are not as good as we would want them to be. And if you take away the Jewishness of it, it is a very human story. It's the way families are. And I remember my son was circumcised, but we didn't have, no one had brisses 50 years ago. It just, if you were a Reformed Jew, you had it done at the hospital and that was it. Okay, now when my grandsons were born, of course they had brisses, but that was 25 years ago and times had changed. People had gotten much more into tradition. Religion was not that important at that stage in the 60s, maybe for Reform, for Orthodox Jews, but not for Reformed Jews. You sent your kids to Sunday school and you went to high holiday services. You know, that was basically it. But I think it's a human story. We can all identify with different parts of the way each person reacts.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised by anyone's reaction.
Yeah. Judy Feldman.
There was one other component to reading the story that I had, that my son-in-law was Black. He died of cancer during COVID, and we had to get him into Shalom. I have 6 plots there, and I wanted him to be married next to my daughter. And it was very emotional. And I had to worry because he was Black. I can't tell you if my son-in-law was circumcised. I've never asked my daughter. So I don't know. I'm not going to ask. But I loved what you said, Elaine. I do believe that this is about humanness, and what it means to be a Jew can mean what it means to be a good human.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of where we're left with in this story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Judy Biederman.
Well, I agree with Elaine. And I want to take this just a little off course, because 2 things. We always assume, or some people do, that clergy is holier than thou, holier than the rest of us. And guess what? This clergy wasn't. He was just like the rest of us, only maybe worse. And the other thing is, orthodoxy can be portrayed as ultra religious and therefore ultra good. But we've all heard stories right here in Chicago of the very bad behavior of the Orthodox community in a lot of businesses. So I thought this story made a case for not idolizing the Orthodox community or their religious leaders, because she made it clear that that's not what we're doing here.
Yeah, I think that one of my favorite stories is, we were young, my husband and I've always known a lot of rabbis because I've been in the Jewish profession, and he saw a young rabbi in the 80s getting high, and he's like, he can't get high. And I'm like, he's, 25. Do you think that rabbis don't do this? And he just had to have it. He's like, you're right, but he never got over it. Evie.
Yeah, listening to this discussion, I realized how many levels I was subliminally dealing with as I read it too. My story is maybe the flip side of Lynn's. When we got married and we looked at belonging to a congregation was very important very early on before we had kids and so on and so forth. And I was probably leaning toward a conservative congregation. Julian only wanted a reformed congregation, but I went to the academy, and you can take the girl out of the academy, but you can't take the academy out of the girl. So I had a lot of rituals that I was so used to, but they didn't have any real meaning for me because we didn't live an Orthodox life, but that was my exposure because that's where I went to school. And I have very, very painful memories of that, of not being Jewish enough or kosher enough or whatever it was. I mean, I had a mother who shopped on Saturday, and it was out of necessity, and would run into the rabbi on the way home, and etc. That's a whole other story. But but to me, the whole idea of the kind of person that you are, and when Lynn mentioned about Lakeside, that was a place that we never ever considered until probably about maybe 7 years ago. We had been at Solel for many years, and then tried Eitz Chaim for a number of years. And Julian said, "Oh, I'd really like to go back to Reformed congregation." But was I ready to come back to Solel? So we went to a common ground thing, which was our go-to place for many, many years. And sure enough, Rabbi Ike gave a lecture. He said, "Lakeside, oh, that's that place. And oh, that's that place," and so on and so forth. So here we are, okay? It was a Sunday morning, and it was just the work that was there. It was just the variety of topics that just kind of spoke to both of us so quickly. And my path has changed. And in terms of, I think it was Lynn, you mentioned about convenience. Well, when we first got married, we didn't keep a kosher home. And then we did keep a kosher home. And I was kind of struggling with it. But then when I bought a food processor, oh my goodness. That convenience. So but did I want one or two? So we kind of made that switch, and still, I mean, I won't allow a cheeseburger in the house. What can I say? I mean, I'm all over the place. Now that we have a caregiver, I have other accommodations that I have made just out of convenience. But so it's always a struggle for me. But then I really have to get to the root when I can, when I'm patient enough to do that. Of what is my reason? What am I doing here? And one of the other reasons when we joined Solel was I didn't want to say to friends, "Oh no, you can't bring that into my house." I didn't, a lot of it has been struggles, but for me, they were major issues that I would lose sleep about. And in the general scheme of things, yeah, there was an expression in the book, The Beauty Queen of Jerusalem, Pilpul, which I hadn't heard in many years, which is really splitting hairs. And I kind of did a lot of that. So, I mean, now that I'm thinking about the book a little bit more, there's so many more levels that are really speaking to me. So I think it was a good choice.
Okay, good. Izzy, Alice, Sandy, then Merle.
Okay, there's two things I want to say. The first thing is, I don't know if you know, but I had a Filipino caregiver for my husband for 4 years, 24 hours a day. And I kind of consider him my adopted Filipino son. I call him. Did you know that they have circumcisions in the Philippines when the boys are 10 to 14 years old, almost mandatory? And I just looked it up so I can read it to you. Tuli is a Filipino rite of male circumcision, is a long historical tradition, and it's considered an obligatory rite of passage for males. Boys who have not undergone the ritual are labeled suppot and face ridicule from their peers. In most boys, it has nothing to do with the Catholic religion. And most boys usually undergo the procedure not shortly after birth, but prior to reaching puberty or before high school, around 10 to 14. And Oliver's both sons got circumcised at 13. They
Oh,
line up at the beach in a line, get circumcised, and run into the water.
Wow.
That's what they all do. It has nothing to do with the Catholic religion. So you have to wonder where this came from. I don't know if any of you knew that. I was shocked because we talk a lot about Jewish tradition. He knows how to keep kosher, all that. So I just wondered if any of you knew that. I thought that was very interesting.
I mean,
no.
I think there are other,
Yeah.
you
Okay,
know.
the other thing I wanted to say was I thought there were few parts of this that were hysterical. There were some paragraphs that were hysterical. One was about when he was talking about, I had been told that Jews were stingy, but to my thinking, they gave away too much. They talked too loudly, they studied too much, made too fuss, but food, they made too much food. They gave too much money away, all that. I thought that was hysterical. Then they talked about in the next room about the woman wanting to give cookies away to bribe the nurses to be extra special nice. I've done that. I thought that was hysterical. And there were just so many things in life. There was another one too. I don't, with another page 100. I don't know. She just went spot on just certain observations of life that the Jewish people do that I just could relate to. I thought that was terrific. I love the story.
Yeah, I thought it was well written. Alice.
Yeah, I just have a question for everybody. So at the end, the doctor friend does show up. So, right?
The
He
rabbi.
The rabbi.
The rabbi, I'm sorry. The rabbi does show up and says some prayers. So I just wanted, was that his redemption? I don't know. I just throwing that question.
Well, I will tell you this. I found a 15-minute video and I'll show you the first 2 minutes. And the prayer they do at the end in the video is Shechianu, which is that we live till. It's not a, that's not a Brit Milah prayer, but it's a prayer.
Well, that's the movie though. We don't know
Yes.
what. Meant.
Yes, we do not. We
Yeah.
do not.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Thanks.
Sandy Kaminsky.
I've been all over around the block with this, with orthodoxy or not orthodoxy, respecting the Orthodox or not respecting them. I grew up in a family that attended only Orthodox shul, and it happened to be around the corner from our house. And when I turned about 12, the rabbi seated me in the very back row of the class and never talked to me. He never touched my hand, my shoulder. He never addressed me. He just sort of ignored me after, I got tall and looked more grown up. And everything was for the boys. And my mother saw this. So she took me on Sundays, in addition to going to Orthodox shul for the holidays. We went to the, not the name of it now, but it was the Reformed synagogue or temple on the west side where
Reform, no ED.
Yeah, but it was called the Washington Boulevard Temple. And Gunther Plaut was the head rabbi, who later became the head rabbi of all Canada. He was a marvelous man, and everything was so different. It was like night and day for me, just night and day. People there treated women and girls the same way they treated boys, and I loved that. Later, I married someone who was conservative, and so we had to attend a conservative synagogue for 15 years. I've been all around the block. I've been to temples in Israel, synagogues in Israel, and I'll tell you, the best place in the world is Makom Solel.
Well, Sandy, thank you for that. Thank you.
When I got there, I felt like I was home for the first time in my life, and I was already about 65 years old.
Okay.
So,
yay. Merle, Joyce, and then Lynn.
I saw an episode of Larry David's show, Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's 29 minutes long. It's season 3, episode 6. It's called The Special Section. In this episode, Larry's making a movie in New York, and his father doesn't call him to say his mother died. So when Larry gets home from New York, his mother has been buried in Los Angeles in a cemetery, and he goes to visit his mother's grave. And when he gets there, the administrator says to him, I'm sorry, your mother had to be buried in a special section with the suicides, the non-Jews, the Jews of the mixed marriages. Sorry, she couldn't be buried in the section that she bought. He said, why? What happened? He said she had a tattoo on her posterior.
Oh.
And then he read to him from Leviticus. He says, according to Leviticus, if there are gashes in the flesh of the dead, or if you incise yourself, that qualifies an offense that excludes you from burial in consecrated ground. And then he mentions Maimonides. And then he says at the end, like Sue said, the law is the law. And so Larry says, what are you talking about? My mother bought a plot in the Jewish cemetery. You can't do this. Anyway, Larry finds a way to move his mother. I want to watch the episode. I don't want to tell you the end, but it's just shocking that he wanted to satirize how ridiculous he thought this rule was, that a Jewish woman who led a good life and had a tiny little rose tattoo on her posterior could not be buried in the consecrated ground. And I thought it really hit home how ridiculous, but there are cemeteries that are not as strict as that particular cemetery was. So I guess when you buy your burial plot, you kind of have to
Make sure.
ask around about this, because there are so many people now who have really lots and lots of tattoos, and they can't be buried in the Jewish cemetery. So I thought the story was fantastic, because it is a ridiculous, outmoded law, but it's there. So
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Joyce.
I remember being in Istanbul and going to the palace, Topkapi, and we took a tour, and there was a room for circumcision, dedicated to circumcision, and boys there at the age of 14 were circumcised. I mean, going back hundreds and hundreds of years, which Ellen and I found absolutely fascinating and somewhat brutal. Also, I had a similar story with our son, who was born in 1970. Our doctor circumcised him in the hospital. He didn't even tell us he was doing it. And he was a brute. I mean, he just did things and told us later. And when I told my grandfather, he was heartbroken. And I said, Grandpa, somehow we'll, have a ceremony in the synagogue, and we too did a baby naming. I mean, what was done was done. We couldn't do a Brit Milah. And oh God, I'll never forget my grandfather's reaction. It was horrible.
I remember going into the hospital and saying, no circumcision. That we wanted to do it with a moil, and
we didn't know enough.
Yeah. And the royal family to this day, who circumcises their kids, a moil. A moil does, more than, I'm still having, I wasn't there, Judy Feldman, and the PTSD of being at a Bris gone wrong. So, you want somebody who's done this particular operation many times. Lynn.
I'd like to go to the last page of the story, and I think she says a lot here about religion in general, which I think the story is about personal choice, about sacrifice, about love, about lots of things. As Evie said, it's got layer upon layer upon layer. But He's talking to his father and he says, "Oh, Pop, you were such a generous man. Why did you stop a few millimeters short of doing all you could?" Which is all of us, we stop a little bit short of doing all we could because we're human. Because even if a person was asked to cut off his foreskin, or for that matter, his entire cock, he needed to give and give and give, no matter how frightened the giving made him, no matter how much it hurt. Marcus raised his face to the star-drenched sky, and even as the rabbi sang whatever prayer he saw fit to sing, Marcus composed his own prayer of thanks for having been allowed to repay even a small part of the debt he owed his father. So he went off book, as I say it, off book to his own prayer. And to me, that's what is so beautiful about Judaism. It is such a personal religion, and it allows you freedom and latitude. And some people call that safe. Some people call it a cop-out. But to me, it's the beauty of Judaism. It allows you to do what is important to you. And I think she captured that very much.
Well said, Lynn.
Yes, here, here.
Very good.
I just want to show you. Oh, that's not the right thing. Okay, let's go to, oh, maybe it was. I got a lot going on here. Okay, share some. Can you see the movie?
We can see a
White
blank.
Just a white screen. Okay, that's not right. Okay, so let's go to share screen. Oh, here. Now you can see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll put it in the chat, but it's just a sweet, it's the whole story in a 14:37 seconds where they are.
Marcus went to see his father, harboring no illusions about what would happen. His father's transplant had failed, and he wouldn't survive the week.
How's Vicky?
Hi, Dad. She's fine. How are you?
They won't let me be buried in the plot next to your mother.
What?
That cemetery is only for Orthodox Jews.
And?
And that is something I am not. Not only am I not Orthodox, I'm not a Jew of any kind.
Dad, you're a perfect Jew.
Now, listen, I wasn't even born a Jew.
Dad, what are you talking about?
And I never converted. My parents were London Catholics.
What?
They were awful. My father, one time he broke my hand.
He broke your hand?
So I ran away to the war. It was there that I met these men, these amazing men, these Jews.
You met Jews in the British Army?
And the best men I ever met.
Dad, who knows this?
I told your mother. I would have converted, anything for her. But every time I thought of getting circumcised, oh, fate, the idea of anyone coming near me with a knife.
Dad, don't tell me you're intending to get circumcised now.
That's exactly what I'm telling you.
Oh, fabulous.
Here, the link is here. Wait a minute, put it right here. We didn't get to, we could have had 2 sessions on this story. That first the son not believing the father, a young person not believing an old person. And then the old person like, listen to me, listen to what I'm saying. And, should he have told the son earlier on, the different family dynamics. I thought this story is very rich. Just click on the link. I'll also email it to you today. Yeah, because it's sweet. It's sweet, sweet, sweet. I think they're English or Australian. They're not in Boca. The rabbi is just as despicable. So you'll enjoy that. If you read the next 2 stories and think we can do them together, just shoot me an email. I'll be in touch. I hope to see you. This Friday night is Tikkun Olam Shabbat, and Karen Fliegler, one of our members, will be talking about gun violence. So if you can make it, that'd be great. Lynn.
What's our first date back?
That's a good question.
September 7th.
Is that what I said? Okay.
Yes, September 7th, I have the change, September
Woo.
7th.
Yeah.
Okay.
6
And then
days.
I had to get, like Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, I had to give off some of our first and third because it's a holiday. So anyway,
It's Jewish.
it's Jewish.
Judy Feldman, I just sent you a chat note. You mentioned a book last week, a couple of weeks ago, Pictures of the Past.
I don't remember that.
I did, Abby.
Oh, Merle, it was you.
It
Okay,
was-
I apologize. I'm enjoying it so much. I haven't gotten very far, but I just the mention of the pictures, but I haven't gotten enough to see if there's enough of a storyline. But thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And also, if anybody has Kindle Unlimited, it's a freebie on there right now.
Oh, okay.
Who's the author, Evie?
Oh, that's a hard one.
Pictures of the Past.
Pictures of the Past.
I'll look it up.
If I find it, I can put that in the email too.
Judy,
Okay.
ignore the chat.
Okay, not a problem.
Oh, Debbie Eisenberg?
Yeah.
Is that who it's by?
Correct. Yes, that's correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'll put it in the, I'll put it in.
History is
Thank you.
wonderful.
All right. Be well, everyone.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Very good.
Have a good summer.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Good luck with the new baby.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Vanessa.
Thank you.
Yes, Mazel tov, almost.
Thank you.